You're listening to ProdCast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio. This episode is sponsored by Maplytics by Analogic. Maplytics by Analogic is a market-leading certified for Microsoft Dynamics 365 geo-analytic mapping app. Maplytics empowers users with powerful map visualizations and routing capabilities within Dynamics CRM to better drive sales, improve business processes, and engage right customers at the right time. Maplytics now works with Dynamics 365 version 9 and Dynamics 365 app for mobile and tablet. Analogic is a leading Microsoft Gold Dynamics CRM ISV, delivering best-in-class Dynamics 365 solutions as well as cost-effective and high-quality programming services. We thank Maplytics by Analogic for sponsoring ProdCast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio.
Welcome back to ProdCast, and in fact, this is a very special edition of ProdCast today. Joel, do you know why? Joel, you're not. Yes, you're not out there, Joel. In fact, this is a banner, a marquee day for ProdCast. We have our first guest on the show, and I have the honor of spending a little time with our very first guest, whose name I will say in a second. But I want to tee up that this person is a longtime podcast listener to many podcasts. In fact, has a podcast on the CRM Audio Network, not just one, but two. And here he will be gracing the ProdCast with his presence. So I would like to welcome Shawn Tabor to ProdCast today. Hi, Shawn.
Hello, Matthew. Thank you for having me. This is quite an honor. I'm hoping to learn something today.
Absolutely, as am I, as we always like here on ProdCast. So, as a little bit of a change of format for this episode, because there are some topics that Joel and I just take for granted, I want to run through a couple of those with you before we get into the meat of the show, if you are game for that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the first one is, are there any go-to apps or tools that you recommend for people when it comes to productivity?
So really for me, I would say the biggest productivity tool that I have day in, day out is, oddly enough, my Apple Watch.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because regardless of where I'm at, whether I'm in my car, whether I'm on a plane, wherever, I get that touch reminder of things, right? Mm-hmm. So if I don't have my phone near me, if I'm not at my computer, I'm still staying on top of important emails, Skype messages. It lets me know when things are happening that I need to pay attention to, right? So to me, that's a really big productivity boost, because I did try for a day to not wear my watch. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I put my phone down somewhere, I was like, I would go off into this other world of inefficiency, and I would just be doing whatever the heck I wanted to and not staying on task.
So I'm curious. So do you have all of your alerts going over to your watch, or how do you actually manage that piece of it?
So I have Outlook alerts, Skype alerts, and obviously text messages. I also have the Apple Watch 3 that has the cellular, so I can actually make a call on it.
Oh, very cool.
Which is very handy. So if I see something super urgent or super important, I can quickly make a call right from my watch, which is nice with my AirPods, and that's handy. And quite often, I take calls because, when you work from home, you're frequently multitasking, right? I frequently take calls, Skype or otherwise, from my phone using my AirPods, because then I can work on something else on the computer. I don't have to worry about, being tied down to my desk if I need to get up and do something. Like I was working on a presentation for one of the upcoming conferences, as well as listening in on the call that I was not a presenter on, and doing some other stuff. So I, trying to multitask as much as possible in that kind of situation. So the watch for me is one of the biggest productivity tools that I have.
Very cool. Very cool. And having that cell capability is definitely a game changer there because without that tether to an existing phone to be able to do that and just make those
Right.
calls, that sounds great.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Now,
gotten me out of a sticky wicket from time to time.
all right. Now, how about like battery life on the AirPods? How's that been for you? Because I always feel like that's a delicate dance.
Well, I always keep the little pod charger in my pocket.
Hmm.
So when I'm not using them, I plug them back in and they charge in their little pod. So if I do it properly, I could probably get a good 4 hours talk time out of them, on and off because they're charging in the pod when they're not in my ears.
Yeah.
If it's straight talk time, like on a couple back-to-back calls, it's probably going to max out at about 2.5 hours. But then, little tricks that I do is I take one out and put it in its little pod charger base,
Yeah.
and then just switch it out when I hear the warning boop boop that it's going to run out of juice. I just switch ears
Oh, clever.
to keep it moving. So yeah, it works.
I like
It
that.
works well. Yeah. So if you're efficient about it, you could probably get close to 5 hours.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, it's not bad.
And hopefully you're not having to do more phone calls than that per day.
Oh, lately,
Uh, okay,
lately it's been interesting.
maybe we'll cover some of that in what's not productive later.
Exactly.
So another common topic that Joel and I go into is around note taking, and specifically we have a bit of an ongoing dialogue around some of the leaders around note taking apps.
Hmm.
OneNote, Evernote, Notepad for a lot of people.
Hmm.
What's your go-to for note taking, and how do you manage those notes and notebooks?
What I really try to do, and I say try because I'm not always successful, but what my goal is every time is to take my notes in OneNote in Teams,
Hmm.
right? So it's a shared notebook. Because one of the things that I find, especially with something like OneNote or Evernote, or it doesn't matter what note app it is, it's fine to take that note, but then once you take that note, what do you do with that note? Especially if you're in a project team, it's important to share and collaborate those notes. So having the ability from a team site to launch into a OneNote notebook that's on that team site and is shared automatically to everybody on the team, they have that visibility. They can make their own annotations. You might find you have the same meeting but two completely different takes on the situation,
Hmm.
which need to be reconciled. So that's what I try to do, and it really depends on the type of client. So, for example, I had a client where they were high net worth advisors, wealth management,
Yep.
and they very much frown upon open laptops typing in OneNote, right? So in that case, I needed to go to my Surface and write with my pen
Hmm.
in OneNote. Uh, it was the same capability for me, right? Because I'm still taking the notes in the OneNote. The difference is the perception from the client was that I'm taking notes and I'm actively listening, as
Right.
opposed to being on my laptop where I could have any number of other things multitasking or
Yeah.
not paying attention.
Yeah. You're on Reddit in the background.
Exactly. Exactly. And I get my Reddit alerts on my watch, so I don't even need to worry about that.
There you go. The ever important.
Ties it all back.
Very
So,
nice.
yeah.
Cool. So another topic that we've covered before, where I'd like to get your take on it, is the definition of a productive workspace. So we've kind of gone through, our what do we have around that helps either drive productivity or keep us sane while we're working, often from either a home office or if it's a physical office, wherever you happen to be for that. So could you please, Shawn, describe your productive workspace?
Well, my current workspace, and I said it that way, it's not productive. I work in what I call fondly as the nerd cave. I'm surrounded by about 400 Star Wars bobbleheads, Star Wars Legos, Captain America shield. I have toys all over the place,
You said
right?
400.
Yes,
Yes. Okay.
400. Yes,
Okay. Yep.
yes, and they're opposed. Yeah, it's bad. And I have an Xbox One, an Xbox 360, all in this room, and there's a daybed for guests. So if I get sleepy, I guess I could. It's completely not productive. So what I have to do is really, and that's part, I guess that's part of why I work a lot from my phone and step away. I take my laptop out of that room and I work away from that room. But yeah, I have a separate monitor that helps me keep Outlook up in a separate window so I can see when those things come in, but then stay focused on my task at hand on the main monitor. Um, I have a whiteboard so that I can, if I have like a stream of consciousness, I can draw it out because
hmm
that's always helpful.
Now,
Um,
are you the kind of person who like puts something on the whiteboard and then keeps it there for a long time, or you like clean it off at the end of the day every day?
I try to clean it off at the end of every day. If it's important, I'll take a picture.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I try not to leave something on the board too long.
Okay.
I don't want it to fade in there and then it makes the whiteboard unusable. But it's really I really like to work, especially if I'm talking about a business process with or about a client. I like to draw it out because I'm more visual that way, and that definitely helps me.
Yeah.
That definitely helps.
Well, I am I'm jealous on a couple levels right now, and let me say why. First off, that sounds like a really fun work environment, even if it's self-proclaimed as not productive. But I
Yes.
think you must have some sort of like productivity genius sitting in there that you're able to accomplish anything when surrounded by that much temptation.
Yeah,
The
it's hard.
the discipline factor that's in there, you must have that one cranked up to 11 there in the nerd
Oh,
cave.
yeah. Well, my boss, he's a stingy one, so and he's not here to talk to defend himself. So I'll leave it at that.
Sounds good. And the other thing I'll say is we should I should make sure I do an offsite planning session there in the Nerd Cave sometime so I can take that in. I've seen pictures before, but
Well, but you haven't seen. There's also, I forgot to mention, a 3.5 foot tall porg that sits behind me. Yeah, it's bad.
is
It's bad.
that
It's really bad.
is that bigger than life size for a porg, or is that how
Oh
tall the
yeah,
porgs are actually
yeah.
supposed to
No,
be?
porgs are about 10 inches tall.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, this. Yeah, and it makes sounds. It's bad. I have a problem. I have a real problem.
Shout out to the Star Wars people out there. We
That's
don't get
right.
enough of those references into podcast, and that's why having Shawn here is so helpful. Um, so then, just one more kind of previous topic I'd like to visit with you, then we can get into the heart of the show.
Sure.
Um, so productivity while traveling. You're someone who's gone in kind of peaks and valleys of travel as I've known you over time. So,
hmm
as you're getting ready for flights or getting ready for travel, kind of what's your process, what's productive, what's not.
So I think it really depends for me on what time of day the flight is.
hmm
If it's I'm taking a flight tonight at 5 o'clock, and I do intend to spend some time working on a couple functional integration documents that I need to have ready for tomorrow's meetings.
Okay.
Um, Typically, pro tip: make sure you buy the internet access before you get on the plane because it's cheaper. That's
hmm
one. But I find that um, getting the internet while on the plane has pros and cons to it. If you're using OneNote, if you have OneDrive for business, you have those files local, or even with Teams, you can get to some of those things locally,
hmm
which is a big help. But if you need internet, my advice: make sure you load up the document um, on your laptop before you get on the plane, and just put your laptop in sleep, because then you're not going and retrieving the entire document. It's just
Ah,
refreshing. That avoids issues with latency on on the Wi-Fi connection,
That's
especially if it's a big file, like a big presentation you're working on.
I was gonna say I've been burned by that on PowerPoint documents before.
Yeah, yeah. Always either save local or have it open and in memory when you get on the plane. Um, I have attempted once to do a Skype call while in the plane, and
Mhm.
that just doesn't work out. So just don't even do that. That's not productive at all. Uh,
Hopefully, you're not trying to lead the Skype call from
yeah,
the plane.
exactly, exactly. And
Latency becomes a bit of an issue there.
a little bit, a little bit, a little tricky, a little tricky. And what I would also say is Skype is definitely okay for IMing while on the standard fare internet that you get on the plane. So
Mhm.
that's always a help. And when you're in one of those situations where you're trying to maintain your billable status, that's kind of a key to be able to communicate with your coworkers to make sure you have all the information that you need
Mm.
to make sure that you're able to get the document where you need it to be. The other thing I would say is um, always before you close your laptop, before when they're getting ready to say, oh, the GoGo Air is getting ready to shut down, make sure that you know whether or not you have messages in your outbox,
Mhm.
because depending on the size, it could be a little slow, and they could stick in your outbox, and then you may not know until you get to the hotel, and then now that email is 3 hours late.
Got it. Yep. Excellent. Well, good stuff. Thanks for taking a trip down a few of the topics there and giving the Shawn CRM Hobbit Tabor take on those.
Glad to do it. Glad to do it. Hopefully, I disagreed with Joel at least once.
I believe you did, sir.
Yeah, outstanding.
Um, so moving into the main topic of the show today, where I wanted to go was talking around password managers and
Hmm.
productivity. As people who are working in and among a lot of different environments,
Hmm. Yeah.
using online credentials throughout the day, I feel like this is definitely one where we can do some comparing of notes
Hmm.
and see what has worked, what is not working, and what are some of those areas where you're constantly working on refining it. So whether it's Excel and app post-its, what are the strategies, those kind of things.
Well, I always whenever I talk about passwords, I always tell the story about how my wife does it,
Okay.
and she has in our loft, she has like her little office area, and uh, in like a horseshoe around her monitor are sticky notes, all different colors, a couple
Hmm.
different sizes. And I asked her, what's all this? I mean, are these notes that you gotta? She goes, oh, those are my passwords. What? She goes, yeah, I can't remember them all. I said, why do you have this many? Why don't you, and I can get you a piece of software that will, you could log them and it'll track them and authenticate to the site. Oh no, that's too difficult. This is much easier. Okay. So that's one way to handle it.
Do the colors mean different things for the different passwords, or is it
No,
just
no,
to make it fun?
no. There's no rhyme or reason. It's just whatever pad she had at the time,
Okay.
and yeah, it's crazy. And when I saw one password, and I'm I'm like, where did this come from? And she goes, well, remember that show we watched about, and it had that person, and then at the time it was this date. Ugh. Well, no one's gonna crack it, so you're good there. But for me, I use Microsoft Authenticator
Hmm.
for as many sites as I can. Um, on my phone, Face ID. I have the iPhone 10.
Hmm.
Face ID and the password vault on that is incredibly helpful.
Yep.
Um, but I haven't delved into the pay for play kind of subscription password managers
Okay.
for a couple reasons. One, I don't know how I feel, even though I guess I'm kind of doing it on the iPhone as well, but it's Apple, so for some reason that means it's okay for me. I don't know why, but
Okay.
putting those passwords on to a service, I don't know if I want to do that. Although there are definite, I can see some benefits storing it in the cloud, being able to recover it, all that good
Hmm.
stuff. But Microsoft Authenticator is probably my biggest go-to for password issues because I'm dealing in various different Dynamics 365 environments, team sites, things like that.
Hmm. Well, so there are a few places where we align there and a few where we do not align as much. So,
Okay.
I'm not an iPhone guy. I've talked about that many times. I'm an Android guy, but
Hmm.
the Android equivalent of, for me, it's a fingerprint ID and
Hmm.
storing my passwords behind that for all of the phone-based stuff. I don't know
Hmm.
how I lived without that
For
before.
real. Yeah.
Before having that stuff stored, I thought, oh, it's not that bad to type in passwords. But then I, I realized how much of an easier endeavor that is having it
Right.
just stored behind some sort of basic authentication like face or fingerprint.
Hmm.
Um, for my personal passwords versus my work passwords, I use a couple of different tools. So for my personal passwords, I have had a similar concern around some of the online, tools where it's
Hmm.
actually being stored in the cloud. So for that, I started using, gosh, it was maybe 7, 8 years ago, a tool called KeePass,
Okay.
KeePass. And it is effectively a local version or a local password manager where you have a super high strength password and you can have, key files that you need to authenticate with as well
Hmm.
to be able to get into your vault. But then it will, kind of paste into your browser for you, or do a type out into your browser for you, or you can copy the clipboard if you, are comfortable doing that with whatever machine you're on.
Hmm.
But I've amassed you know, it's an awful lot of login credentials over that time that are in there. So the hassle of trying to move between one service and another would be a heck of a lot. So they've got me, but fortunately, it's been a free application to be able to use.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
and then I do have my encrypted file with all of those passwords in it that I keep in a file sync application. I keep it on Dropbox,
Hmm.
so I can have that between different computers, and I don't run into kind of ownership issues on that because while it's not intentionally meant for kind of sharing between multiple computers at the same time, I'm not actively changing passwords that often where it's
Okay.
really a problem. Um,
Hmm.
so then the third place that I go to for things like demo environments or kind of shared test environments that I work with, for those I do use LastPass. It has nice browser integrations
Hmm.
and especially since I've been at Microsoft and I have a lot of people on the team who are we're trying not to reinvent the wheel with each person. Being able to keep some metadata around, okay, what is this login that I have? Which environments should I actually be going to if I'm logging in with these credentials? And mapping that back to some of the, whether it's a demonstration asset or an example of what, an implementation can look like,
Hmm.
those sorts of things. LastPass has been a really good one for being able to, share that and store the metadata around it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I might have to check those out, especially
Yeah,
that free one.
yeah, exactly. They have a version that doesn't have to be installed on your local machine. It can just live in a folder. So if you want your own kind of quote unquote portable version of it that lives inside of, Dropbox or OneDrive or whatever your syncing platform is,
Okay.
you don't have to physically install an executable on your machine.
Okay.
Um, And then,
Interesting.
a couple other things. I mean, there are lots of password options available out there. I've tried 1Password before. I've tried a couple of other, um, you know, variations on lesser known password management tools. But again, the security privacy concern around,
Mm-hmm.
are they doing a good enough job of protecting my information? Have shied me away from some of those. So I try to
Right.
stay, on the up and up.
Well, and what I've tried to do with most of my important sites is wherever they offer two-factor authentication, I generally employ it.
Yeah, and as an example, LastPass does use two-factor. So
Oh, good.
yeah,
Good. That's
yep.
good to know.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you kind of weighing in on that. And before we sign off, I'd like to check in with you and see if there's anything that you would like to add that is not productive.
Yeah, actually, given my last comment about the Nerd Cave, I also have every digital assistant. I have a Google Home, I have an Amazon Dot, and I have Cortana both in my laptop and on the Xbox One.
Mm-hmm.
So at any given time, I could be asking one or many of them to do something, whether it's turn on the lights in the Nerd Cave, which would be the Google Home, play something on Spotify, which would be the Amazon Dot, or change the channel on the TV, which would be Cortana in the Xbox One. So none of that is productive outside of being able to see at night in the room. I have also tried and failed miserably at leveraging these digital assistants and their commensurate assistant apps on my iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
None of them, for me, are worth a damn. Because
if you're using all of them, it's hard enough to try to keep names straight. I mean, I get mad at my dog and I start saying my daughter's name.
Well, so I tried them in order, right? So at first I tried with the Amazon app, the Alexa
Mm-hmm.
app, and it's awful. Unless you're doing shopping lists, it's worthless. If for the Google Assistant, I like the concept of it, right? And you could actually talk to the Google Assistant on the phone. That's all good, but it doesn't give you reminders. It doesn't pop up an alert. It doesn't give you any of that, or at least I couldn't get it to do it. So,
Mm-hmm.
so for me, it was out. And then the Cortana with syncing, that was just a hot mess because the login on my phone is not the same as the login on my laptop, which is not the same as the login on my Surface. So it got all confused.
Right.
So yeah. So right now, I think there's a lot of potential for them, but right this moment, digital assistants are just not productive.
All right. There's that hot take from Shawn.
Little
all right.
passion there.
Hey, well, I really appreciate you agreeing to come on as the first guest here on ProdCast. You've set the bar high, at least I think. And with that, I will just encourage you to stay productive, sir.
Thank you, sir, and I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Take care.
This has been ProdCast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio with Matthew C. Anderson and Joel Lindstrom. Follow Matthew on Twitter at @MCAnderson or on his blog, connectingthedata.com. Follow Joel Lindstrom on Twitter at Joel Lindstrom. ProdCast and the rest of the CRM Audio Network are available on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and anywhere else fine podcasts are available. This podcast is a production of Dynamic Podcasts, LLC.